Hey, what's up, everyone? You're currently tuned into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 in Santa Barbara and netnetradio.com out of Tijuana. Today, Lietoc and I are joined by esteemed soundsmith and long haul Kranky lifer Mark Nelson. Hailing from Evanston, Illinois, Mark's been recording for the Kranky label since 1993, starting as a member of the elliptical Labradford. Since then, he's been in consistent movement on the Kranky roster, recording another 5 Labradford albums, 2 anjou records, and a smattering of sonic trips into dub, techno, and americana as Pan-American. His latest album, The Patience Fader, came out on Kranky in February 2022. How's it going, Mark?
It's going good.
Cool.
Thanks for joining.
Well, how's everything going up in Illinois?
It's going okay. We're sort of in a holding pattern until winter really kind of kicks in. It always just sort of stalls out on the cusp for a couple months of just sort of, I don't know, kind of neither warm nor cold, neither wet nor dry.
Yeah.
And then eventually it'll just drop into to winter, which is, I like winter, so I'm kind of looking forward to getting that sort of northern experience rolling pretty soon.
How cold does it usually get over there in the winter? Like how like what's like January or something when it's like peak, like
wind chill?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, it's not as cold as you might think, but it does have there are
some brisker days,
times when it gets that way. Yeah, so it there's more fluctuation, I guess, than one might think. But when it's really cold, it's really cold.
Yeah. Do you have any like favorite like winter hobbies or anything that like keeps you busy during that time of year?
I mean, I like being out in the cold, and we were talking about cycling a little bit. I mean, I do that's always been something like I've always enjoyed that in the winter, as long as the roads are clear.
Yeah.
Just going slow, and because it's I like riding in the dark. It's just the roads feel kind of like they're my own.
For sure.
So, that a little dog walking is nice too.
Nice.
Wow,
that's awesome.
That sounds long.
Have you been traveling this year or anything like that? We saw last year you went on tour for the Patient Fader.
I haven't been traveling for music at all this year. I don't think I've done any Pan-American shows this year. I'm probably forgetting something, but not anything out of town.
Yeah.
So just a few kind of family trips and that kind of thing. But
you go anywhere cool? You like leave the country or go to like a different state or something?
We came to your neck of the woods around spring break. Went to Joshua Tree and
sick.
That's the spot to go to. Yeah.
It's been like a dream of mine to go there for years and years. So
cool. Wow. Did you have a big experience out there in Pioneer Town, or just like really get deep into the park?
Well, we had a couple setbacks. My daughter got COVID.
Oh, that's a bummer.
That was one. And speaking of cold, it was fucking freezing when we were there, like in March or April, something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean,
yeah.
It was really, and there was a windstorm kind of thing one night that was incredible. Like we were staying in 29 Palms, and it was just like this hotel is just going to be launched into the so that was it was cool. It was really cool, and the park itself, I mean, that time of year was pretty empty, I guess, from what I gather. When it's summertime, it seems like it's a lot of people.
For sure.
We had a couple days of just wandering in the park, and it was absolutely beautiful.
Cool. I'm actually going to be going there in like 2 weeks. I have like a week off of work, and every year for New Year's, my girlfriend, like our friends, like we go on like a New Year's trip, and we're going to try to do Joshua Tree, but Joshua Tree is always like so crowded around this time. It's like hard to get like a campsite for a lot of people, So for that group trip, we're going to do Death Valley, but just me and my girlfriend in like the next 2 weeks are going to do a solo trip just to Joshua Tree for a few days. Because we haven't been over there in a while. But yeah, it's going to be so cold there. Like I remember last time when we went in like late December, early January, like our water like froze overnight, like while we were like camping out there. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, Joshua Tree is like so beautiful, you know, and like
I would like to go in the summer and just feel like that insane kind of desert heat. That seems like that would be cool.
Yeah, I've gone in the summer too. It's so hot, dude. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's awesome though. Yeah, that's sick.
I'm just in it for the rocks in the winter.
Yeah,
winter,
dude. Yeah, hopping through the rocks is like so fun. Like you can get like so lost in like those boulders. You know, it's like pretty cool. And there's like an area of like the park that we went to that's like literally called just like the Wonderland of Rocks. It's pretty sick.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look. I mean, it doesn't look man-made and it doesn't look natural.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Where do you want to head to right now, Maddie?
Well, just a little bit back before there though. So you have been on the road at least touring post-COVID and you were touring in Europe mostly. Yes.
Yeah.
Again, because a lot of the dates I've ever seen when I see Pan American stuff, you're going off into Europe, and I'm curious about just what is it that brings you out there more often, or what's going on?
Well, I mean, I think from a very practical point of view, I have a European booking agent. And I do not have a U.S. booking agent, so I've tried to find one, but no one seems to want to take it on. So, I'd love to do more in the U.S. I've other than Chicago, New York, that might be it for the last 4 or 5 years. The only places I've played in the U.S. are. But I would love to make it out to the West Coast. I would love to make it, more even. And in like I've gone up like Minneapolis and stuff too. So, New York and then a few Midwest kind of shows. But yeah, I would love to get out more. But I just don't have the. I don't have the skill. I don't have the patience. I don't have the. Money to kind of do it myself, try to book a tour myself.
Oh goodness, yeah.
It just takes so much. Patience probably more than anything. Trying to, and I just can't. I just can't do it. Like book a tour myself for the U.S. I would need some help, and it's been very. It's particularly in the U.S., but in Europe as well. Post pandemic, still it's very competitive. There's like people are the nice places to play have there's just a lot of pressure from a lot of people on the road wanting to get in there. So it really helps to have a booking agent, I guess, is part of that too, to cut through some of that. And hopefully maybe something will come up there, but in the absence of a booking agent, I don't see myself doing too much traveling in the US for that.
What's like the difficult part about it? Just like getting people to respond to you and like, I guess just like wanting to host you type deal?
I think, and routing is a really big,
I see.
It takes a lot of, sort of trying to envision how you're going to piece all these things together. And if, just kind of coming in cold is, it's hard to get a promoter to kind of respond. And that's not on them. It's because they've got, I think the system works better when they're dealing with people that they're familiar with, which would be the agents.
That makes sense.
You can get on the call with someone and say, "Hey, I've got these 5, things coming, like over the next 6 months. Like, how do you want to, so you can kind of take care of a lot of things at once, instead of just chasing down each individual person. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then
go ahead, Matt.
No, in that time though, at least. No, I mean that definitely it happens. I think that's a like a really one like true answer for a lot of this stuff. But in getting out there, like what is some of the great like stuff about those European venues that you've gotten to play, or kind of the audiences that have been out there? Because last year Bruce had his book come out, and a lot of the stuff that's in there talks about that relationship that Kranky builds with European audiences or stuff in the UK at least. So it seemed like, yeah, there was just a lot of love out there.
Yeah, and that happened pretty much right away for Labradford when we started. And it coincided for us pretty closely with the internet really kind of being everywhere, and people being able to connect from all over the world very quickly and easily. And I think that was a big factor, like for Labradford, that timing was right, that when our first records were coming out, it was possible for someone to just, we had friends and, that are friends now, but, contacts from Vienna, from, Finland, from London, stuff like, and they were able to just kind of send us a message. And, it sounds ridiculous now because it's so commonplace, but in whenever that was, mid 90s, that was relative novelty, to be able to communicate with people all over the world like that. And the music that we were doing and that Kranky was doing, I think was a natural fit in a way for that. It was not super dependent on language, for example. So maybe it was a good fit to translate, cross culturally.
I think that's interesting you bring that up, because repeatedly in times I've gone out to look for old Pan American or Labradford coverage, there's actually a lot from, well, not like a lot, but there's a few from the late 90s and like 2000. And it's pretty interesting to see these dispatches from Web 1.0 of people who got on very early to the internet and were reaching out to you guys. And again, like do you remember when you first logged on to the internet or kind of any computer stuff? Was that in the 90s or even back in the 80s?
I mean, I was not, I was not like into it early, it never really captured my attention until it was kind of inevitable, I guess.
Yeah.
So no, it wasn't a big part of my life, like in that kind of, in that early phases of the internet that people kind of wax romantically about. I was not a part of that. So yeah, I guess I missed the boat a little bit there, but not, I definitely, yeah, it was more like when it became, kind of mainstream with things like AOL and, that's probably when I would have engaged,
That's interesting though.
It is interesting to look back on it, because there was a certain pioneer spirit that it took to be into it, and I didn't have it, but some people did, and it must have been, to be, one of the few people kind of creating, I guess, some of those habits that now are so inseparable from basically everything we do. It's interesting that, I don't know how to really formulate that thought, to be someone, who, be of an age to have seen that come and then overwhelm, sort of how patterns of interaction used to be. It's interesting.
Well, actually, kind of that brings us to some of the stuff that we wanted to talk to next, at least, because in some of the interviews I'd seen, I thought this was a pretty interesting thing. You talked again about the process behind kind of the music you had originally gotten into. You you're a diplomat's son and you didn't always live in the United States, but you were really interested in kind of roots music, and a lot of stuff that you also found when you did move to Northern Virginia was coming through college radio, which it's not a medium a lot of people find stuff on, but we're hanging out on here as well.
Oh, it was, I mean, it was the lifeblood of like finding out about stuff in the 80s and 90s, you know. It was essential, like the kind of networks that were built up. You know, I was never like a fan or participant in like the hardcore underground, but I certainly benefited from the community that the hardcore scene created, you know, in terms of venues, fanzines, record stores, and college radio stations were absolutely essential, you know, such a key component of that.
That is a really interesting take. Yeah, I guess like the hardcore scene really did like kind of like set up like that whole like, I guess what like every genre of like DIY music like kind of participates in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it built that infrastructure. You know, like for you know, even beyond, you know, for touring, for releasing records yourself. You know, like it was, you know, people, you know, labels like Discord, you know, that were very open with sharing
definitely
their like resources, you know, for like, here's how you do it. Here's how you contact the pressing plant, and here's what you give them. And, you know, here's what a test pressing sounds like, you know, here's like some 10 places you can send it to, you know, for, you know, potentially for distributors or that infrastructure of record stores that would maybe take something as a consignment item. I mean, the whole, the DIY scene that came up in the 90s and, you know, was all built on the back of that hardcore community, hardcore, like building that infrastructure, you know, and all we did was kind of say, well, this system exists. We can just plug other types of music into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting.
Oh, no, you go on, Thomas. Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, did you, like, back in the day, like, when you were booking, like, were you booking, like, your own shows and stuff? Did you ever, like, use, like, what was it, like, book your own fucking life and stuff?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Well, no, it was before that, but, you know, that's a good, but that type of thing. It was, you remember, there were fanzines that would put, you know, like, they would list venues and stuff. And,
oh, that's sick.
You know, you'd call things and they'd be like, oh, no, we don't do music anymore. Or, you know, it's like, that guy left, you know, like, you know, so now it's, you know, we just do like open mic singer-songwriter. You know,
interesting.
Like, we just do comedy now, or no, we're just a, you know, like a pizza restaurant now. We don't do that anymore. Stop calling. So,
yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
So there's, again, not to keep, you know, whatever, beating the internet over the head, but, you know, I mean, there was always a lag time of stuff, you know, like, it wasn't, if you heard about a place in, I don't know, Baltimore or something, you know, like that, your information might be like 3 years out of date.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting to think about.
Oh, man. And it feels odd because now if someone's like 3 years out of date, or depending on the resource, I'm like, oh, that's fine. But no, things could change still. It's like, oof.
Yeah. And you're just, you know, you're just basically calling people cold and like, it's kind of strange.
It is interesting. I feel like today it's like kind of like that too, at least with booking, but it's like, it's more like social media based than like giving someone a phone call.
Or sending a tape, you know, just randomly sending a tape through the mail and saying, call me if you ever, you know, call us if you want us to play.
I still, occasionally you still get a tape. I'm in that world a bit, and I cover some different cassettes for Tabs Out. So I at least get a box of promotional tapes, and every now and again somebody has contacted me like, hey, I've got something. Do you want to hear it or review it? And yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I remember like one of my kind of seminal early Labradford experiences was like, we were sending tapes around. And it was like, I wonder if we could play at like the Knitting Factory in New York.
Wow.
Possible, And so send a tape and I guess the etiquette was send a tape, wait a week and call,
Oh, interesting.
So somehow managed to get through to the booking agent there and was like, okay, I'm Mark. I'm in this band Labradford. I sent you a tape. I wonder if you listened to it. And he was like, oh, that's in the callback pile. And I was like, oh shit.
That's crazy.
We're in the callback pile.
Whoa.
The Knitting Factory. We've made it.
Dude, that's it.
Yesterday I was just listening to the Arthur Russell tape that Audica Records put out of a live concert of him at the Knitting Factory. That was where I was like, oh shit. Hell of a venue.
Yeah, the venue's legendary.
Completely legendary. And yeah, I mean, that again, like when I was in high school, I used to like go to the library and like, they had the Village Voice, again, probably like 3 months out of date, but just like looking at, New York venues and, the kitchen or, CBGBs, whatever, Knitting Factory, and just looking at who was playing, just looking at these names,
Dang, the Richmond libraries or the Northern Virginia libraries, they had Village Voice?
Yeah, they would have the Village, like, those, like those wooden racks of newspaper, like,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
They would have you're a librarian. You would know exactly what I'm talking about. The Village Voice would be hanging there on that rack.
Wow.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah.
Dang.
Interesting. Well, I guess should we round back to this question, Maddie? What music are you currently into right now? Like, what's kind of like on your deck nowadays?
Oh man, that's the worst question.
I'm sorry, because there might be like 20 to 30 things. You always give great answers on this, though.
So now you put even more pressure on me. I was listening today. I mean, listening to the Cinematic Orchestra today, which is something that just every once in a while I come back to that to that band, and it's always something that sounds cool. I think I got there from listening to some of the like Sam Gendel.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah.
Kind of some of the music that's associated with that I associate with that with his music and the other guy whose name it's the other Sam whose name
Yep. I've seen both of them play at Big Ears, and it's pretty funny because they get out there and it's just them, their effect pedals and a drum machine. And they just like to, and Sam Gendel just really likes to jam with people. Every time I watched him at the festival, I saw him another time. He just loves to jam.
I mean, imagine he's got to be playing around Southern California a fair bit, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's something, I would say over the last year that I've got, that's something I've come back to a lot. Something new that I've discovered that I've come back to a lot. Been listening to Darudi, like kind of some of the some of the weird like early 2000s like kind of synthesizer and records that he did that are really odd, but they're pretty compelling.
My dad was on holiday in 1984. With my mom, he picked up Smith's Hatful of Hollow and Darudi Column's LC. And that started off for ages, he has loved Darudi Column.
Right.
And it always, he never showed that to me. And I got the factory cassette of LC that they did in a little special box. And it's beautiful. I'm glad he's alive.
I think it's a really interesting career that he created, and I just admire the artists that kind of have a signature sound, but they don't repeat themselves, and that's such a strange, such an interesting like needle to thread in a way, like something that I think generally you associate, Vinnie Riley of Darudi Column with guitar, but he does have records where it's synthesizers or drum machines, and sometimes it's vocals, and sometimes it's instrumental, but yet it all kind of exists in the in the kind of archipelago of its own. It's its own sort of series of islands, kind of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I lost the metaphor there, but
one at least thing I noticed you'd mentioned in another interview there. And I was kind of curious, you mentioned listening to some ECM records and what ECM really stands out to you right now? Because I'm prepping a big ECM dive, low key.
Okay.
Yeah.
Low key.
I would say, at the most, like probably the last thing the John Abercrombie records from again, like probably I think they're early 2000s. He had this quartet with Mark Feldman playing violin. So not Schofield, Abercrombie guitar, Mark Feldman violin, Joey Barron playing drums. I can't remember the bass player's name, but there's a couple records. One is Cat and Mouse. One is Wait Till You See Her, I think it's what it's called. Those are just beautiful, beautiful records. And some Paul Bly records. I've been listening to some live. I think it's the subtitle is the Oslo concert. I can't remember what the main title of it is. Like just solo piano. That's also gorgeous. So.
Perfect. Yeah. I'll be on the lookout for those Abercrombies. Definitely. That's a name that pops up a lot.
Yeah. I mean, and then the older stuff, that he did, Timeless, and he did some duo records with Jack DeJohnette.
Yeah, I've seen the purple one, the purple special edition one, if I recall. I've been meaning to get that.
Yeah, and some of them are under. And then he was, I guess, before Bill Frisell, he was kind of the go-to sideman guitar player. So he's on a lot of other people's records too, not as the leader on a lot of ECM stuff too. So I kind of try to hunt those down as well.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah. Nice.
All right, Maddie, where should we flow into?
I guess we'll get into talking actually about Pan American music, or so a little bit of Labradford, and then leading into Pan American now. It is we don't have big confetti or celebrations or a cake, but Precision has turned 30. We got the 15th anniversary reissue here in a digipack and the $2 swap meet find
nice
of the original to celebrate here. But again, just the book from last year that Bruce Adams did, it covers a ton of that logistical stuff. I really loved all of the planning around the album. I found really beautiful covered. It just seemed like it was something that everyone really wanted to shepherd and get through there. And I remember ages ago, I'd emailed a tape label out in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I was really struck by what they were doing. I'm like, this sounds like Precision era Labradford. And they were like, yeah, that was like a massive influence on us. And continuing to talk with a lot of artists over the show here, Labradford albums come up consistently, but Precision's one that really is special because there's that Lynchian dread to it, I feel. And in other interviews you've done, you've mentioned getting to some of Lynch's music there at the end of the 80s. I don't know, like if you'd seen Industrial Symphony, the VHS he did, but the Julie Cruz stuff, the Twin Peaks soundtrack, I imagine. And
all that. And the Eraserhead kind of stuff. And it was
so good.
Common place to have cassettes that people would just dub of like incidental music of. I mean, I don't even know where I got it from, but just a homemade kind of Eraserhead tape that they would it was just, the dialogue removed, but just somebody would sit there with their tape machine and go like, okay, I'm going to record this, off the VHS or whatever.
Oh, sick.
So I had, all of that. And that was certainly a big influence, like in terms of, his vision, I guess, of what was going, what the veneer was sort of, what was behind the American veneer, I guess. It's
Yeah, no, I remember seeing years before, probably about 4 years before I listened to Labradford, I saw Eraserhead and watched it over 2 nights with my dad. It's like a perfect Act 1, Act 2 there kind of thing. If you stop it in the middle,
right.
With the parent, with her leaving, and I wanted the soundtrack. I immediately wanted that soundtrack. I never felt that about a lot of movie music, but I was like, oh, I'll find like the original vinyl. And then I realized, well, Sacred Bones had done it, but I didn't even listen or care about vinyl. And one day I got the CD. I always am waiting for that tape if it shows up. It's a collector item. But that really was, I remember that when I would get to Labradford in college and hearing that kind of continuation of that, like scaling back of the veneer, just of these buildings, of these zones without people. But it was very monolithic in a really wonderful, unique way. And I also loved, this is the thing, it was you look inside the booklet, it was you, and oh goodness, was it?
Carter,
thank you. I'm sorry. And it was just recorded at the Sound of Music. And that was the studio that you used for most of those Labradford albums. But it seemed, I'm curious about what that space was like. It's such a curious little name. And it just seemed like it was a hole in the wall.
Well, I have to correct you just a touch.
That's okay. Thank you.
Precision was not recorded at Sound of Music. It was that was recorded at American University, had a studio where we recorded that. And there was another studio in Richmond that a guy had that was like it was like an 8-track cassette, which is like a weird format.
Wow.
Mildly. But it was like somehow he had a machine that was a cassette, but it was an 8-track. And then Sound of Music was a studio in Richmond that we recorded at later, that our friend John Morand opened, and it went through a couple phases, and it still exists, I believe, and it's changed locations 4 or 5 times. You know, it had kind of a heyday in the early 2000s when. Oh man, I'm blanking on the guy's name who's a friend of mine. David Lowery from the band Cracker and Camper Van Beethoven.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he was living in Richmond at the time, and he invested in the studio and did a lot of work there, and he had a lot of contacts with with labels that would send artists down to Richmond to record there. So yeah, David was a good, I wouldn't say we were like close friends, but friendly acquaintances. And he used to live across the street from where Labradford practiced, like our first practice space. And we would practice at night, and I guess we're loud. We didn't, not intentionally loud, but I guess just the exuberance of making noise. We got out. So we would come outside and like smoke a cigarette, and David would be sitting on his porch, like smoking and, listening and stuff. And we just kind of like wave. So, I mean, it was a kind of a small town community, music community in those days. So, yeah.
That's sick.
Was that, and does that kind of, though, I mean, when you're talking about those days, that's like early 2000s there, turn of the century.
Yeah, turn of the century. I might even be talking about like 98, 99, something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Over time with those kinds of Labradford albums, the technology, it's really interesting to kind of follow that, because there was a dialogue about just with that itself of just what was going to show up on an album and what potentially would happen there. But in other interviews, you mentioned how specifically, again, you were really interested in some of the guitar stuff. And was it Carter was thinking kind of forward about technology, if I'm getting that right? Although I wanted to stay pre-82.
In a way, Carter was not thinking forward about technology at all, because he was, very committed to his analog. So, and that was, he was very early into kind of finding a place for those in modern music, because it's again hard to believe, but like, 80s we're let's say 90s, there was very little interest in synthesizers and electronic music, and Carter was definitely, I guess, a pioneer in kind of putting those front and center and saying they're instruments and not novelty, kind of noisemakers. The technology side of it, when we started using digital tools and sampler sequencer kind of stuff, that was Bobby Donnie, who was playing bass. He was kind of the one who was most interested in that and really brought a high level of understanding and competence with those tools to that was Bobby. Yeah.
They, especially on, because I remember when a lot of people my age, they don't always get to Media Naraha, but I remember hearing that and being immediately really touched by the usage of electronics on just the way that there were those flickers, or kind of it sounded different than a lot of electronic music I had heard, or what it was suggesting, which played really nicely. Because at the time for KCSB, I had been going up through the Kranky catalog, and I knew a few titles, but right after that, for the first time, I had heard good old Pan American Red, and that was a really, really big album. I've shared that album with a lot of people because it for me was like a really big introduction to dub in a way I hadn't considered. And
the Labradford record, or the
Pan American, Pan American there,
right.
And just with that, it was interesting because at the time you had done an interview with a very strange enigmatic Italian man, the Pierre Schrafer, if I'm getting his name right. But he asked you, and I love this answer you give to the question. He just asked him, he's like, what do you like about dub pulses? And you just said it was giving you a warm feeling. It filled a room. Mm-hmm. And listening through the Pan American albums that you'd done, especially in the 21st century, it's interesting because as the dub production has moved away a bit, and some of the bass as well, that commitment, though, I think, to making music that is warm and filling a room, I've really noticed in car rides, listening to music, going to sleep. Specifically, what is it about that MO of filling a space that's been so integral to you?
I think it comes from a kind of minimalism, trying to have a small gesture fill a large space, both, whether that's like an emotional space or a physical space, with I guess more rhythm oriented electronic music, maybe we're talking more about a physical space. Mm-hmm. And when you remove like the rhythmic element, maybe it transmits a bit to more of an emotional space. But I think it does, how music exists in the air. I guess now it exists probably more often than not in people's headphones or earbuds and stuff, but ultimately it travels, it travels from a speaker or from an instrument through the air. It occupies physical space. So I think, how do you fill a space without loading it with information, leaving space? How do you fill a space and then leave room for someone to be part of that? I don't know if I can put it better than that, or put it more clearly than that. But that's something I've looked for, a way to kind of create a room to enter into, so I do think of it as the music as a physical space that is opened, that creates an opening for an emotional space.
Yeah, No, I get that idea there of kind of trying to using your music to create a space to begin with, or something that's just there, because it's with instrumental music, which can take a bit for people to really come into, or immediately just works. Like, I don't know, today I was looking at the DVD for Quiet City, which is again something that I think was that was kind of an interesting point for the project, to do a DVD, but a lot of it, you leave these really static shots that are brilliant for just conveying that music, conveying a sense of the space, giving a resonance that's there, ready for a listener to match onto.
Well, thanks. I mean, I think that, the challenge is to kind of create something that's open-ended to fit, circumstances that you can't prepare the music for every way that it's going to be met, So how do you keep it open and still, control, I guess, the personality that you're using as an input, Frank,
Yeah.
That's sick. All right.
I think, we can go to that next one right there.
Okay. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least, I think, yeah, you got it.
Cool. During the bulk of the 2010s, Pan American stayed dormant as you were raising a family and doing other projects. But in that time, the moniker returned and shifted again. What sparked the contributions to Geographic North and long forms, and the bigger shift to Americana and roots music?
I mean, I tend to do just about anything that anybody asks me to do. So, it never is not a compliment to be asked,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've become good friends with Farbod and the crew at Geographic North. So I was really happy to work with them. And same with the long form. I kind of struggled with the long form one for a long time, like trying to figure out what to do, how to approach it.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty specific, I guess. Yeah, they're asking for something.
Yeah, in specific, not just like anything,
Exactly.
And
it's not the way my mind tends to work. I tend to like as I've gotten older, I tend to like shorter collections of shorter things.
Yeah.
Rather than, I think Labradford, there was a lot of, I guess, let's call it long form type of improvisation that we would do in rehearsals and early shows and stuff. But I've lost, I guess, the knack for engaging in that. So, with the long form, but then it was a challenge to like, well, what if I can just figure out a way to edit together different pieces to create one thing? So, I mean, again, like I like making things. I mean, I kind of have a pretty regular practice of doing things, and it's really just, I mean, as corny as it sounds, it's a privilege that people want me to do stuff, and then I try to do what people, if people are interested, man, I'm all for it.
That's really sweet. And again, you've got like also just, practice space where you go in, you press record, you just rehearse and just kind of trust the process of what emerges there. Is that what you've been kind of mostly doing these past few years?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, I've been, I think I've said this in other places, but I don't really think of like writing, material at this point. I don't really like set out to like, today or this month or this year, I'm going to make a record, and like, I need to start writing 10 songs. And it's more, I like playing guitar. I like playing, working with, software for like, just sequencing sounds and sound design and editing thing, so I'm still very curious just about exploring that, and from guitar point of view, like just practicing. I like practicing, I like getting better or feeling like I might get better.
Yeah.
So, and then if material kind of emerges from that, something kind of sparks and it's like, oh, this sounds like something Pan American, needs to do, then, I pursue it. But, I'm not really driven by like the need to create more songs or to to create more releases, but I still really like doing like releasing stuff, and I still like creating songs. So they're almost they're sort of the I guess the collateral damage of a regular routine of playing.
Oh no, not the collateral damage. That's a funny way of putting it, because
this is the wrong. There's too much like of that in the universe right now, so I shouldn't. That's not a good. It's a good like joke, but it's not a good thought to put into the world, or a good phrase to invoke.
Yeah, it's all good.
With though, kind of because the running parallel to the Geographic North and long form stuff at the end of the decade, I remember when I saw the track premiere on, God, it would have been the 405, which I don't think exists as a site anymore, but Shenandoah. And I remember in 2020 talking to Bobby and Forbot over at Geographic North about that cut. We all loved it, and it was such a gorgeous piece that really, really anchored a sun, and I think became something of a way to like tap into this era of music that you've really been doing right now. I was going through A Sun in Patience Fader today, and one thing that I really noticed, at least, is electronics. You really only use a little bit of the sequencer or a drum machine that's kind of similar to some of the stuff you did on River Made No Sound. Just like super duper minimal, but it keeps this beautiful pace to the stuff. And you've talked a bit about the place. I think again, like it's Memphis Helena, right? If I'm getting the correct name. I was just reading about that again today, and yeah, you're building a room there completely.
Oh, well, thank you. It's kind of cheating to use those to use words like that, because it already starts to set a sort of mood in place. But yeah, thank you.
At least, and then I don't know. I guess you're mentioning that. This will be a wild one. I just a tangent going back. I've seen online from Immediate Naraha, Blast First had done a promo copy with full track titles, and then the version on Kranky, though, it's just those letters. And at the time, at least on that and A Luxo So, the lack of words, that specification to like leave it all on the listener was really big for you at the time. Have you ever considered at least doing that again with Pan American?
Not really. I mean, I like, I guess there's no one answer to that, but I don't really think in terms of like writing lyrics anymore. I did that in the earlier Labradford days. So I think like the song titles have kind of taken the place of lyrics to
oh, I see. Yeah.
Degree. I think the Blast First thing, that was just a fuck up on their part. Cause like we'd sent them a tape, and those were our like, just our shorthand names for the song among each, so we, just our working titles, if you want to, that, like, there's always, like every band has the like, new song or like guitar thing or whatever, like those kind of stupid, just you need
Spaghetti was the name. You have one of them, and So we, I guess we'd sent, basically like a demo of some new stuff with those titles to Blast First, and they somehow it got through the system that when they when they released it, I think when they released the promo version of it, it had those.
That's funny.
They used those instead of the, I think we just created, like either we shortened them just to letters or we just chose other letters. And then part of that came too from, I don't even remember, this again, Bobby was kind of doing that record, the artwork he sort of took took that on to be like, I have an idea for this artwork. And I think the painter who did the paintings was a friend of his. So it's kind of too much pointless background, but I think from his point of view, when he was working on the design, it was like, I want as little getting in the way of the painting. So that was a factor that that led to those song titles as well. Like, we just don't want to clutter up the graphics. We don't want to cover up the artwork with graphics and letters and text.
What interesting tidbit. That's sick.
In this era of music, at least going back to what's going on right now, even though, again, doesn't seem like you're doing too much, I know, at least, have you been recording with Stephen Hess again in some capacity, or just kind of playing around with different bigger sounds in this new Pan-American palette?
So the way I have a bunch. I have a number of little projects cooking at the moment. It's labels are very sensitive about this kind of thing nowadays because, the sad reality is that they have, when a release comes out, there's just a tiny little window of time to get people to notice it. Yeah, basically. So it's. Even though it seems kind of silly to say I can't talk about it, but there are a couple projects that are coming that I out of respect for the labels who want to have their little window to try to get people to pay attention to. I can't go into too much detail, but there's some pretty cool, for me anyway, projects coming in the next year or so, and some new collaborations and I did. Steve and I have gotten together in that, to work on some of that stuff recently. So,
at least something that you can talk about that did come out this year that has been of interest to me, and I've had a lot of fun playing these, at least on the radio, is In Daylight Dub, which is collecting some of the material from River Made No Sound era. And again, it's just a handful of those remixes that really were kind of British and they weren't available in the US. But what was that impetus to collect that material again? And even though I know you've kind of said like you're in a different mindset for listening to that stuff, do you still go back to any of the dub? Do you even like reimagine any stuff that you've done as just kind of stripped down now in a folk or Americana way?
Not really. To the second part of that, not really. And I hadn't really revisited any of that stuff for years and years and years. And again, it was like with Geographic North or with Longform, the guys who run that label, Foam on a Wave, just said, I think they originally were interested in maybe reissuing the first Pan American record. They've done, their label is essentially like a reissue label. Yeah. For various reasons, like that wasn't going to work to reissue it on their label. But then we kind of struck on the idea of like, hey, there are these other tracks that I did that were on compilations or singles that have never really gotten a proper release, and so that was just an opportunity to kind of dig through some of that and get re-release and remaster some of the ones that I thought worked the best. So yeah, that was fun. I mean, and it's awkward to listen to your own music, but in this case, like, it's so long ago that it almost isn't even mine anymore. It's just I could hear it in a way that didn't make me feel self-conscious, like sort of the music the more recent music that takes maybe, I don't know, 15 years to like they say, like all the molecules of your body are replaced every like 25 years or whatever it is. So once that happens, the music you made with those old molecules no longer makes one self-conscious, I guess.
That's That's good to hear, though. It's nice to have them out there in the world proper, I can say.
Oh, thank you. And I was pleased to that they sounded good. Like it's hard sometimes. It's so hard to I mean, it's vinyl is so unpredictable in terms of how it's going to sound, especially with that kind of stuff, because all that bass is very difficult to get right from point of view of pressing vinyl. I mean, CDs are much easier to get a good sort of frequency, kind of spectrum. But yeah, in this case, it was nice that it didn't sound terrible too.
All right. Goodness, I guess we're coming, Thomas, to the last big section here we really got. At least some kind of again, playing off of some of the thoughts here about the ambient country or Americana stuff that also still it links up with this daylight dub and some of the other stuff from this period. You sat down with Bob Holmes on his ambient country podcast. I got linked that from a friend. He was like, Bob Holmes is doing this podcast, and he talked with Mark Nelson, and I was interested. I was really excited. I was like, what's going on here? Holmes calls, or he I didn't know that Eno had given that beautiful quote to the Dwayne Eddy wearing Eric Satie. Mm-hmm. And again, it's a really great podcast. The playlist is killer that you've got there. But what I've noticed, I've been talking with a lot of people about ambient Americana, or there's this term that really is coming into focus with a different generation of music listeners. And some of the stuff I had seen on some different tape labels happening, a little bit like Geographic North on their comps, or some of the sketches for winter stuff. But like Power Roland's Gersh up in Ohio with the Beacon release, Old Saw, another group that's out in New England. And as soon as I heard the term, I've gone back to Quiet City. I went back and thought about A Sun, and then some of the other stuff that was going on, those 90s Labradford records. And a term that I kind of had stumbled into earlier this year, and I thought connected a lot of the music you'd done. It was something that we kind of been getting here. The term sonic road mapping, which, I don't know, are you familiar with that term at all?
No. I can kind of, I think I understand what it means though, but no, I haven't heard it before. That's cool.
I was really happy to find this. The writer Mark Fisher, he did all of his capitalist writings and his K-punk stuff, and he loved dub music and really loved Burial. And at times I'd even felt with like River Made No Sound, the Forerunning Dog track really predates some of the very kind of minimal ambient stuff with drum that Burial does, and also the focus on crackle. But the idea of sonic road mapping, he really applied to artists like Pull and Phil Jack. And I also, again, really saw that in the work that you were doing that was being brought up here on in Daylight Dub, but also is still there really heavily on A Sun and the Patience Fader. This idea of kind of sonic road mapping. And that, to me, with like ambient Americana, all this stuff, this term being thrown around even, where have you kind of felt just in the music and with that, when people approach you to talk about the term or kind of how your music is coming out there for a different audience, maybe?
Yeah, I'm always a little suspicious about kind of micro genre names, and maybe I'm just suffering, trauma from being labeled post-rock at a young age. So I tend to like music that that crosses over different boundaries, of genre, and then to sort of, kind of create. So I'm going to go with that. I like sonic road mapping, because it doesn't seem to indicate a sound, but more like an approach to kind of space, and to again, maybe going back to what we were talking about earlier, like an idea that, the way that music creates physical space, music sound waves literally travel through space, and there is that emotional or humane, space that opens up inside of us when we hear something that connects, that connects us to something. So, I guess I'm not motivated by genre,
I think that's a beautiful way of putting it, though.
There's sometimes there's the downside to that is, once you put something in there, then people, then it becomes something that might be, that might put limits on what somebody is, how somebody's conceiving of either what they're listening to or what they're doing,
The codification stuff is really detrimental at times, and it can sometimes just take away from, like, there is just a great release here, regardless. It's been, because I remember as soon as I kind of found out, I went through and listened and realized there's a lot of the same stuff here. But if we use this term really broadly or think outside of the box, you would just have fun getting to explore people's zones and just have fun with the space. Like, I know in another interview, you mentioned Chill Out and Apollo, and then like playing off of that, I'd listen to like some Pat Metheny, and some of the stuff there, I don't care if it's ambient Americana or whatnot, but it still has that sound that it travels, it's going somewhere. And I love the transitory, or even like the Orb with some of the cuts on the first couple releases, it's that same stuff. And it all kind of gets in a big soup in my mind together there. It's interesting how things have a moment, like how then what you're describing intersects with time. And why certain things resonate at certain times and then disappear for a while, and then they start resonating again with people. And it's funny you've met to hear you bring up Pat Metheny, like he's somebody who that keeps coming up in the last like 6 months. People keep talking about him, where he was for a long time. He was kind of a hard figure to embrace, because it has a lot of his music has a very 80s kind of sheen to it. And it's not as cool, I guess, as some other music from its era, but yet all of a sudden, it's really cool to see like that now how the way that he crossed from as a very popular artist, doing really weird things and doing, being, fully, a jazz musician basically from head to toe, but yet never quite fit in anywhere but yet is really popular. I mean, he's sort of it's a miracle, really, so yeah, it's taken me a long time, like 20 years of trying to kind of get into his music, but it's nice that so many people are kind of joining now, that he seems to be having a little revival, like among people interested in the things that we're talking about. So. Even again, he did though have like this year a really just sweet album of him making sketches in a hotel, and no deadlines, no nothing, and just when he's like, oh, I guess that's it, he made an album of just him kind of contemplating in those spaces he could.
What is that? Yeah, I'll have to look for that. I don't know that. I'm not familiar with that one. So yeah, that sounds awesome.
That was his one. I've got it on hold. I'll look for that.
Cool.
But yeah. Dang, Thomas, I think
So is that pretty much it? We like ran through all of our questions here.
I think thank you, Mark.
Right.
That's been
sounds great. Cool.
Do you
the final stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say also, where can people keep up with it? I guess just all things Mark Nelson, all the music you put out and stuff. Do you have any like one place that you like archive everything or?
Not really. Probably like in terms of like just day to day, my little Instagram world is my little window into social media. So that's probably the best place. At an event, you can contact me there, or just other than that, like the music's all Bandcamp would be another good
Cool.
good spot, to hear the music and contact is available there too.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, do we have any listener questions, Maddie? Should we go through those, or I don't know if we got any.
All I know is that we got the one that's, I would ask a different question instead of asking that question, which is something I didn't, playing off of this one we got. If we're ever going to get, if that trio's ever going to come back again, let's just say in archival form, would Kranky consider the Labradford remix EP? Has that ever come up in any years of like, hey, we should do this? It doesn't seem like Bruce at any point, or that in the 90s when you were doing those remixes, you had cared. That's the only kind of thing about
they were the remixes were a Blast First project.
That's right.
They were. I think Joel at Kranky would be very skeptical about that. That is not the Kranky way, put it that way. But I wish I'd kind of collected those, because at some point I had a bunch. A bunch of them were made that just never came out.
Mm-hmm.
That we were, I've lost. I've lost decades ago, lost the cassette I had of them. There were some really cool ones. The one I remember particularly liking was like FM Einheit from Einsturzen and Neubauten did.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty cool. And then Pansonic did one too.
Oh.
So then that was sort of the Blast First extended family that we were, lucky enough to be, hang out with those guys and stuff when we would go to London. So yeah, I don't know if Paul from Blast First even has that stuff anymore. It was kind of by the time we had, collected 7 or 8 of them, the idea of doing a remix album had sort of passed out of the cultural moment had shifted, I guess, away from that. So never quite reached the final phase.
Sometimes it happens.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a big regret, but I would like to hear them. I don't necessarily don't really care if it's released, but it'd be kind of interesting just to hear them again.
Mm-hmm.
It's a time capsule. Definitely. There's all kinds of fun stuff. Those ambient comps, the down tempo stuff, like the tortoise one or the techno animal one. But it is literally, it's like that's 98. You can just feel it.
I mean, that's exactly right. And I did some remixes, and so it was like really exciting for a year.
Yeah.
It was like, and it kind of played out, pretty quick. It was like the other thing that was happening in the rock world, or was like all those like tribute albums,
Oh yeah.
I just found. I was cleaning up my folk CDs, and we found the Kiss tribute from '94.
Yeah, there you go. Oh. And the Carpenters one was like, speaking of like.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It has some moments like going back to David Lowery for the Cracker version of Rainy Days and Mondays is absolutely gorgeous. So anyway,
I love it.
There's my musical recommendation. I'm sure that's YouTubeable.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right. Well, I guess that kind of brings us to our last question here. It's kind of the biggest of the show. Maddie, do you want me to ask it?
I guess I could do it today.
Maybe. If you want to, I mean, I can read it.
Oh man.
You
go for it. The suspense.
Yeah, it's a heavy one, Mark. We ask everybody on the show this question. Nobody can escape it. All right.
A shock.
So a rat is going to jump into your mouth. Do you want this rat to jump into your mouth head first or butt first, and why?
I think head first.
Right.
Because it just seems like if it's jumping, it's probably jumping forward.
Yeah, just logical. Yeah.
I don't really have a choice. And, you know, it's not my nature to confront problems head on, and I'm going to go ahead and make the leap that a rat jumping in your mouth is a problem. So I'm going to take this opportunity to be less conflict averse and just look him eye to eye, face to face.
Yeah.
We'll hope for a positive outcome for both of us.
What a great answer. That was like probably the most like thoughtful answer we've ever gotten for this question. Like that was so good.
All right.
For the conflict, for understanding that a conflict's coming, you're going to emerge victorious here, but you know,
well, that was sick.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. Well, that's all we have for today. Thanks for tuning into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 every Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Net Radio every Wednesday at 7. This has been Mark Nelson. Thanks again, Mark.
All right. Thank you so much.